Welcome to The Power and the Pain, where your past isn't your prison.
It's the fuel for your purpose.
I'm Greg Pease, combat veteran, NLP trainer, and your guide to turn trauma into triumph.
And I'm Catherine, truth teller, mirror holder, and voice for the breakthrough hiding in your breakdown.
This is The Power and the Pain. Let's go. Welcome back, everyone. We left off last week talking about the decision of forgiveness and how that first started as a discipline and an experiment. That really, in the beginning, when I first made that decision, so later on, I realized forgiveness is a lot more than just a decision, a lot more than just a discipline. And in hindsight on my journey, I realized for all the areas we're not healed, like we get to go on this healing journey. And when we heal things, it becomes easy because we unconsciously see the world differently. So we can just easily, we don't have to do a thing when we heal an area. For all the areas we have not healed yet, we will need to be disciplined in. So in the beginning, discipline's part of the journey. And if your life was something like mine, if you have a lot of healing, you're going to get to have a lot of discipline. So I think in the beginning, it is a discipline. And even before, I talk about this a lot, but I think even before discipline is motivation. We have to have desire. I believe desire is motivation. Like if we don't have desire, like none of it's going down, discipline's not even going to work by itself. I look at that motivation and desire. Like if we were building a fire, this would be the kindling.
Okay.
So the discipline is like the big logs. If we just try to stoke this fire with big logs, it's going to be really, really hard. So if we try to just go into like discipline because we think we have to do a thing, it's going to be really hard to do. But if we have desire internally to accomplish, acquire, do, be, have, whatever that thing is, that's like the kindling wood. That desire creates that. It's the easy ignition of the fire. But just like kindling wood, if we were like camping, that's not going to last us all night. So the kindling wood is like the desire, the motivation. This is what gets us going. The discipline is what keeps it going all night. And as long as we physically tend the fire, as long as we continue to be disciplined, we can just keep this fire going. However, if we heal, we then have this eternal flame. We don't have to man the fire anymore. So in the beginning, it was discipline. And for me, I made sure I took some... I took the scenic route. I didn't want to like get there too quickly, you know.
You don't want to take any shortcuts.
Yeah, I wanted to like really make sure I took it all in. The shift for me from this discipline to the journey that begins. I think it was like roughly around 2014. So we're like 3 years into the journey. It was the scenic route. And the thing that I identify with in life was a book I read, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. This book, I tell people all the time, like I've read thousands of books by this point. This book is in my top 5. And like it's you know, you got to be pretty high up there. You know, there's a lot of books. This book is, I think, incredible for the way I describe this book to people is I think it's the best script written on how to treat other human beings. It's really a great, I utilize it as a manuscript of how to treat others. It sounds crazy to say, but like all of us all we know how to treat others is what we learned up until now. And at that time in my life, I was not very wise on social interactions, because of, again, how the childhood unfolded. But in that book, Dale Carnegie quotes someone, and I forget who it was, and he said, it says, we shouldn't judge others because we're no different than them under other circumstances. Mm. I'm not sure why that one hit me. You know, it could have been any book. Ultimately, I'm sure just where I was at internally on the journey. Yeah. That created this spark or awareness for me that continues to evolve, and having an awareness for the other person's circumstances. Mm. Now, the journey of healing, it can be scary. It can be hard. It can be dark sometimes. It can be all of these things. Having a coach or a guide is incredible. And it has to be someone you feel that connection with, because they're that like grounded place. But that journey that started to unfold is truly imagining being the other person. Mm. Go ahead.
Well, so in this, you've already talked about how your stepmother, this is who you were forgiving in this situation, and you had talked about the other book, the forgiveness book, and the discipline that came in. So, what is the motivation that you felt that made you want to lean into that discipline? What was the kindling for you that made you go, okay, I'm going to try this experiment?
Yeah, beautiful. I'm going to do my best to put the experience in words. That's a great question. I thought, so we talked a little bit about in the last episode, I thought all these like things were snake oil, all the books, all the seminars, all the coaches, all the things. I thought they were just duping people, selling hot air. And I was like really certain of this. I didn't have an experience, but just the way I grew up, like people talk negative about the motivational world. So I adopted like, oh, I don't want to be bad. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be duped. I don't yet have an awareness of where this stems from, but something inside of me, like at a very, very deep level, always wondered, what if? Mm-hmm. Like always, like I didn't have a bad experience over there. So there was always this thought of like, because in the motivational world, the way I saw it and understood it, it was like, anything's possible. Just believe. And I mean, you can build anything. And that's what I say today. I try to remember and break it back down. But I didn't believe, right? I thought they were just like, oh, people are paying to feel good because they said it's possible. And so it felt good while they said it was possible. But something very deep inside was like, you have to prove it first. Like we have to. So the motivation was, I mean, maybe proven that it didn't work, but like the motivation inside, I couldn't leave Earth of my doing. Like I had to check this box. Like, is this a freaking thing?
Yeah.
Is there something in that room for real?
Yeah.
So that was the initial motivation. And that's where the discipline, that's how the logs burn, because I'm like, even though the discipline was, I'm just doing this, but the healing journey hadn't happened, I kept going with the discipline because I'm like, hey, I don't actually know if this works, but like, it's not going to be because I didn't give it everything.
Yeah. I mean, you did take the scenic route. So you were willing to try.
Right. 100%. Yeah.
Okay. And then also, though, in that phase, you had mentioned that was kind of where you were hermiting and you were isolating. And so then when you're talking about, like having a coach or having somebody witness you in that, I do believe that a lot of this, a lot of our wounds happen in relationship and community. And so I think also a lot of our healing then gets to happen in relationship and community. And so then take us, what brought you out of the hermit phase and then into seeing that, hey, maybe there is something that is powerful. What gave you trust in yourself or other people?
Yeah.
Which came first?
Yeah. I think a little bit of trust in self, but then trust in others. That journey. So the journey of forgiveness, I start having a shift in roughly say 2014, and then 2000 and I think 2019, I crossed paths with NLP. Now, between 14 and 19, I go on this journey in, like, I'm still hermiting and I'm still reading these books. And I'm just like, most of these books were people that had passed. These books are like 50, 100 or more years old. And like the things they said in there stood true today. So it was like, holy crap, like they had to know something much deeper than surface level. I found trust in dead people.
Yeah.
Or their message, their words. So that goes on until like 2019. And that's the experiment piece. So I'm just like, well, what would it be like to actually imagine to be the other person? And that's a really hard journey, because we say in forgiveness, like we say, like, I would never do that. I would never, the thing that happened, like we're like, no, you would not. I am certain of that. If you had their genealogy and lived their exact experiences, you would have made the exact same decision. How grateful are you didn't? That, when we can access gratitude for not being that person, we can also, I believe, and for me, we can begin to access compassion and empathy. So like I think about on my journey as a young adult not being healed, I mean, I made some decisions that I look back on, actions, things, behaviors, relationships, and I'm like, oh, like so cringe. Like so cringe. Okay. And then at that time, if you would have asked me, I'm certain I was doing the best I could.
Yeah.
I would never behave like this again. Like, it's so cringe. That was the best I could with those experiences. Where do we get to community? So 2019, I crossed paths with NLP, and I really just kind of overhear it, and I research NLP and I research companies, and I was called to go with the Tad James company for whatever reason. Like, no one sold it to me. No one talked to me about it. I didn't personally know anyone I never even heard of NLP before. And when I went through becoming a practitioner, I did a 9-day training in Orlando. I'm not consciously sure to say why I felt so called to do this, because even though I was reading these books, I still did not trust these people on this. I thought they were selling hot air, but I took action on this.
Yeah.
I felt like there was something in NLP that I would be able to use for myself. And again, like the motivation's like, well, I got to prove that it's not. Either it is, or like I can definitively know that I went through and it's not. And then, okay, I can move. I have closure.
Yeah.
When I went into that, we've talked about, and we can even go more on another episode, but I fight that for the first couple of days. It's a 9-day evolution.
Yeah.
I fight this. I've never been open to this community thing. And I find out later on, being in the community and such, I staying in the masterminds. But during that evolution, there's a exercise called parts integration, and it's a pretty intimate exercise. And they bring me to the front as the demo, which obviously, like, I have to choose to go through. I could just say no, but I'm like, I'm here, let's do it. And I find out later on, like there's like a trainer assistant in the room, and she was telling me, she was like, yeah, I told Simon it had to be you. Because if you have this experience, she's like, I knew if you had this experience at the front of the room, like you couldn't deny it afterwards. So I'm very grateful for that. But so they take me to the front of the room as a demonstration, and Simon, who's he's a very wise individual. He's a NLP master trainer. And so he's taking me through this exercise as a demonstration to everyone else.
Yeah.
And he's good at what he does. He's good at what he does. So I have this experience, and I cry in front of the room, and we can probably imagine, but up until this time, like, don't cry, like, suck it up, Buttercup, let's go. Shit happens. I cry in front of this room, and like, I get so much support from everyone, and like, that really like opened the door to that community piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, that forgiveness piece, that F word, that's a big one.
Yeah.
It is a big one. And, you know, given that circumstances happen to other people, I think that sometimes there can be this, like, we're not condoning the action, or what did it feel like for you to like fully release?
Yeah,
what
that's a
happened?
good question. All right. This is a deep, deep subject, and we might even do like a whole nother episode on it in the future. It was a journey, and I did an exceptional job between 2011 and 2019, but 14 and 19, I was taking this. That was the experiment piece, because no one was there to validate, is this right? Like, I just do things, but I'm like, this is what they're saying in the book, so this is how that must apply in my life. So, I mean, I did an exceptional job. The truth is, like, we take off. I mean, my whole life started to shift 2020, 2021, 2022, and that community piece was a lot of it. But what does it look like? It's a journey. I want to re-say this a bunch of times. But what it looks like, if I just spell it out in a shortcut, when we can get to a place where we can access empathy for the other side. Yeah. And it's so hard. And the reason why it's so hard to do is because if we empathize with that person, then we believe we are empathizing with that action. And then we are making it in some way okay. Like, if we're empathizing with it, then the action, it's almost like unconsciously we're telling ourselves, if I empathize with that action, then I can't correct or say that action's wrong. Here's what the journey looks like. We have to, and listen, I had to go on this myself, and make sure those that are listening in, make sure you guys reach out, drop comments, let us know how we can elaborate further. But what it looks like is when you can separate the person from the behavior, you access compassion for that person if you were that person. The behavior is not tolerated. It earns whatever consequence or boundary. It is separate from the person. It's hard to separate, or it was for me. If it's easy for you guys, take it. When we can see the behavior separate from the person's responsible for it. Okay. If someone owns a business and their business goes out and has some type of, we're all free and clear of this, mistake somewhere, the business owner was not there. They were separate from the mistake that was made. They are responsible for it. But they are not the mistake. They weren't there. Okay. I know a lot of people listening right now are saying, hey, but she was there. Okay. When you can get to that place, think about me and you drove here today. Those were actions we took. We're not drivers. That's not who we are. We're podcasting right now. Well, someone can choose an identity, but I'm not a podcaster. I'm doing a podcast. It's not the identity of me. It's the thing that I'm doing. I'm responsible for it, but it's not the identity of me. When we can, again, journey, but when we can get there, the realization is, like, my stepmother's no longer with us on this earth, and I went through forgiveness first, just how my journey went down, but then I was doing my best to take the action through the judicial system. So we're not tolerating the behavior.
Yeah.
We're just having awareness for if we were that person. It would have been hard. Like, I was telling someone was like, I don't know how. A lot of people suggest to me, like, I don't know how you could. And I'm thankful. I am thankful. It was a journey. years and years. But a lot of people are like, I don't know how I could. People tell me that didn't have my experience. They're like, I could never forgive that. I don't know how you could. I don't know how it's possible. And I tell them, if we were to, let's just do this visually. Let's imagine if we were to separate her from her behavior, the behavior is what she did to children. Let's just imagine for a second, she never had children. She would still exist and need help. Mm. And if she never had these children, she did, I know, that's why we're going to deal with that. If she never had these children, would we not all look at that woman with pity and say, oh my gosh? Mm. I mean, you would, everyone would. That woman needed help. Mm. If we saw her operate for who she was, we'd be like, holy smokes, like, I don't need help. Give her my share. Mm. And it's a journey to get to that place. And then also, like, let me help you. And you're going to be accountable for this. There's a consequence for this. I can't save you from that. Yeah. And you as a person, like, if I was you, if I messed up that bad, I would hope that someone would still, a human being would still want to help me. I'm a soul. Mm. So that's what it kind of looked like in a long journey. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, and I believe, like, first of all, I love the way that you bring in that, like, we're all free and clear of this and doing all that, you know. But even in, like, feeling those little shifts, and I get that it's a journey. Like, that's where life is a journey. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's beautiful that you are able to also share this, because I feel your heart in wanting other people to have that type of freedom. Would you call that forgiveness freedom?
Oh my gosh, yes. That's a beautiful word for that, yes.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I heard somebody say once that we can learn things over a lifetime, or we can earn them or learn them in an hour over lunch. And I feel like that, you know, by sharing that, I would think that, you know, one of your intentions with that is to also share and give other people kind of that shortcut.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to go. So if somebody was in, or even if it was you when you were there, is there something that you would have, if you had heard it, or if you could say something to that version of Greg?
Yeah.
What would be the advice that you would have given, or what would be the encouragement that you would give that says that it's worth it, or that you're worth it, or
you know, my mind was going somewhere else, and then when you said the worth it piece, man, the advice that I would share there is, if you allow yourself to imagine the future version of you, you can have parts of that neurology today, and it feels good. So it's like a salve for the wounds today. Mm-hmm. And because you focus on that future self, it will become easier to pull into it. This journey is layers. So the biggest piece of advice, as you collect your small wins, those are your evidence that it works. As long as you just keep collecting wins, you have to arrive at a day when you look back and have your podcast, have your platform, have your stage, whatever it is for you. Collecting those little wins. Those are the evidence that it actually works. So once you believe inside, then nothing can hold you back. Then it's like, you know, before, once upon a time, I was afraid to tell my story. Now people have to tell me to shut up. Like, no, nothing's going to hold you back once you believe. But I remember the days, and for the people that, like, I want to believe, because I remember, like, I wanted to believe, like, could that really be a thing?
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to believe, but before I believed, I went out as this experiment. And again, like, every time there's a win, don't write it off. Don't underestimate. Don't be like, well, yeah, no, like, collect those, like, notice those. And as you do, eventually you'll be like, holy shit. Like, you'll look back and there's too many wins. There's too much evidence. You're like, all right, this is a thing.
Yeah.
What do I do now?
Yeah.
I mean, you just start collecting the years, the days, the months, the weeks, the years.
Yeah, I love that. You know, and there's like this idea in positive psychology, there's this idea of like our saboteurs and like the judge, and the judge as being something that is like the main one that most people have. And
Yeah.
I recognize my judge that comes up,
Yeah.
but also with that, you know, we can judge ourselves, we can judge others, and we can judge circumstances. And I think, you know, we've kind of talked about some of that stuff
Yeah.
here, and that, you know, that little shift is the noticing and the awareness of it. And then we can separate ourselves from that.
100%.
And then I go, oh, I'm noticing that judge is, you know, and even naming it, and, you know, can name it whatever you want to, you know, like sometimes I just let mine be the judge, and, you know, but I'm like, oh, I'm noticing that
That beautiful.
judge that comes up. And, you know, then we can celebrate. I can celebrate that. Because my judge will want to tell me like, oh, you should have done da 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 da.
Right. Right.
And instead it can be just, oh, noticing that I didn't do that this time, or I'm noticing it and I caught it, but I can celebrate the win.
And the more like that's you separating the person from the behavior, like you are you. And then there's programming when I say behavior. When we do, like, because you do that, I'm going to suggest, and when we do that with self, it becomes so much easier to see the other person as programming and a spirit.
Yeah.
Because like real easily, like when we first just have awareness, like, oh, I have the judge too. When we first have the awareness, like, oh, I have the judge. And then beautiful. I love it. I mean, golly, I loved how you said that, how you shared that, separating like, I am doing that thing. Who's doing it?
Yeah.
Who's doing it? It is separate from.
Yeah.
And then just by that awareness, we can't not have the awareness. Oh, when I allow that to be an identity, I'm unaware of the way that controls the situation, and it's not positive. Oh, shoot. That person never got to a level of awareness to separate themselves from that. They're a child of God just as I am. They have programming playing out in this way. Like if Jesus was here, he'd be washing their feet. Yeah. I think this is probably a good place, man. We got to some good stuff today. I think this is probably a good place to bring us to an end. The goal is everyone listening that you guys can digest these nuggets in just a simple commute, 20 to 30 minutes. Next week, let's take a dive into, you brought up the judge. I love it. What did it look like judging ourselves? And what did that journey of freeing ourselves and forgiving ourselves? I mean, I talked about today, I shared that journey of forgiving someone else, separating them from the behavior, and then being able to access compassion on that side. What did it look like internally?
I think that's a great question.
Awesome. Well, if you guys are listening, make sure you subscribe and check us out next week. We're going to take a deep dive into that subject.
If this hit you deep, trust that.
Your pain has power, and your story isn't over.
Follow, share, and send this to someone who you think might benefit.
I'm Greg.
And I'm Catherine.
And this was The Power in the Pain. Keep stepping into your power.